Alright, hello everyone, and this is a video just briefly explaining about a few things that I haven't already mentioned in the last part of the vacation trip. Yes, vacation trip, not in-depth walkthrough as I was mentioning before, because of certain limitations I learned about when it comes to online and in regards to the coaster crew in general, as I've currently learned. Anyway, I just wanted to explain that when it came towards things like weather conditions and things of that nature, for Friday, people might be wondering why didn't I film anything like the scare zones or anything of that nature. Well, it was just because of a physical condition my grandmother was experiencing that I was not able to film anything on Friday. As for Saturday, when it came to the trip, I did experience at least 3 scare zones: the Maniacal Mechanical Scream Works. I've also experienced Cutthroat Cove, and I did experience Tombstone Territory. However, it was slightly raining at first when it came towards at least about 2 of these scare zones, and then when I was about to reach my 4th scare zone for the most part, Cornstalkers, and was about to enter with my family, it started to heavily downpour that Saturday night, so that's why we eventually had to leave the park and everything else in regards to that. Because of that, I did not get to experience all of the scare zones. Thus, I will not be reviewing them for the last couple of minutes in regards to the video. So instead, I just wanted to give you more of a brief close-up of that special item you saw in the very first part of the trip. Yes, as you all remember, this is that skeleton key thing that you saw near the very beginning of the trip. Yeah, it really shines, but I'm betting you'll be able to see this just fine after I've learned that there's just a wee bit of glare reduction in regards to these videos and everything else. But yeah, there's a close-up. I'm sorry you cannot read the text. That's because the plastic skull and the metal alongside that holds it together really scratched up the card really badly. But if you can see those holes right there, that indicated what I was able to successfully get through, and that was all of the haunted houses. And because of that, I can now tell you my own review and my own opinion on the haunted houses. And I know that you, the viewers, will have your own special opinions on which haunted houses you like the best if you've ever experienced Cedar Point's Halloweekends. And I know for the Halloweekends fans that are experiencing it, they have dealt with that quite a bit. So anyway, first off, my first review is of my number 5 pick, and that was Eden Musee's Wax Museum and Chamber of Horrors. In my honest opinion, I rate it as my number 5 pick because Eden Musee's Wax Museum, in regards to its negatives, was that it was too short. There wasn't a lot of scarers or screamsters in there trying to surprise and scare me and things of that nature, which was really disappointing. And another disappointment was there was nobody to address me as to where the skeleton room or key, or as you heard in the very first part of the trip, the secret room was actually located. So that was really disappointing that I did not get to experience anything of that nature. The only positive I gotta say for Oh yeah, and the only other disappointment, if I haven't already mentioned it, was that the haunted house was real short. Yes, real short. Compared to all the other haunted houses that they had at Cedar Point's Halloweekends, the Wax Museum was real short, and that was a real disappointment. The only positives I gotta say were that there were a few slight good decorations and things of that nature inside the haunted house in general. So, aside from that, now I will go on to my number 4 pick. My number 4 pick was actually their newest haunted house, Hexed. And the reason I give it the number 4 spot was that Hexed was actually a little bit longer than that of Eden Musee's Wax Museum and Chamber of Horrors. The theming was actually a lot more creative and a lot better, but actually an entire school based around witches and stuff. The first couple of decorations and the presentation near the very beginning was quite good, and there were actually a little bit more better scares presented when it came towards the haunted house and everything else. The only disappointments and everything else is that eventually, as you went further into the haunted house, the scares started to really become not nearly as fantastic as they were first presented near the beginning of the said haunted house. And in addition to that, there were some bits of decorations that were just a little off, along with, as I just said, so not enough, really great, nicely presented scares as there were in some of the other haunted houses. It did have a skeleton room, however, and it was actually quite a creative secret room that I did get to experience and everything else. Anyway, here is the spoiler. The secret room for Hexed is that it's an entire room filled with mirrors, and you're supposed to say the words hocus pocus at the right mirror in order to be able to get out of the place. And it has actually, awesomely enough, a gigantic disco ball shining about while in there, in addition to all of those house of mirrors. It's not like your typical house of mirrors where they're huge, gigantic, and form a maze. It's just an entire room covered to the brim with mirrors and a disco ball hanging above. All right, now for my top 3 picks when it comes to the haunted houses. I'm happy to say, my number 3 pick for the haunted houses was Eternity Infirmary. My number 3 pick was Eternity Infirmary. Why do I pick Eternity Infirmary as my number 3 pick? Well, I'll say one great positive about the haunted house is that it is the longest of the haunted houses at Cedar Point's Halloweekends. So that's one positive. Another thing that I thought that was really greatly done, aside from its theme of being an entire haunted house, where the theme is that there's a bunch of insane psychopaths or a bunch of insane mental asylum patients and everything else who have decided to finally run the contaminated mental asylum and everything of that nature, which people who have experienced Halloweekends know exactly what I'm talking about by now when it comes to Eternity Infirmary, who have experienced it. Anyway, it's my number 3 pick because I really did like all of the more bloodier and more gorier decorations that were a lot more presented within this said haunted house, which I have to say was really, really nice. I did like a little bit more of the darkened effect, which I thought was a nice touch, but it wasn't too dark, so it was not way too difficult to be able to see what I was doing or be able to get through the said haunted house in general. But the darkness did actually cause a little bit of difficulty seeing some of their great decorations within the haunted house, just a tad bit, which is a little bit of a negative, but not a too major of a negative. And I have to say they had a lot more better presented surprise scares and things of that nature, even more than said Hexed and things like that, which I have to say was actually pretty darn good. But another slight negative that puts it in the number 3 spot, like I said, is not all the scares were, really well done. There were a few that were slightly off and few that didn't really, come out and surprise me, and in general of that nature. Anyway, here's the next spoiler for said skeleton key room in regards to Eternity Infirmary. The skeleton key room in this case is actually a pretty gross one for some people. But the thing of it is, you're put inside this room with a mental asylum patient who's a grown fat man who thinks he's a baby. And the idea is that he's trying to tell you to change his diaper and things of that nature. And sure, I probably assume by now that pretty much the so-called fake poop that was within those diapers and everything else was probably, no doubt, just some random bits of chocolate or anything of that said nature when it came to my number 3 pick, or Eternity Infirmary, in that matter. So, now that I'm done with my number 3 pick for the best haunted houses at Cedar Point, my number 2 pick was actually Zombie High School. I actually have to say, this one is literally, and I mean literally, and this is finally the point where you, the viewers, will know what that word was I was always, blocking out, which was just one word, but it was retro. And I now know what retro means, and in this case, I literally mean it when it comes to Zombie High School, because it actually had a 1980s theme to it, and it had a lot of even greater, even more scarier, nice, iconic, bloody decor when it came to the haunted house as my number 2 pick. In addition to that, the scares and screams were actually a lot more surprising in this haunted house, as the screamsters, who were supposed to be, of course, zombie-based students, did a much better job at being able to scare me and the people that I saw inside the haunted house, including that of my brother, who had experienced this haunted house as well, I'm happy to say. And yes, a lot more better scares, a lot more bloodier, more gorier, more greater decor and Halloween decor and things of that nature, and it was pretty darn nice. And in addition to that, for the skeleton room key, and this is the next spoiler for said Zombie High School, was that for this room, for that room, you actually experience a group of lockers, and you have to choose between the many different numbers of lockers what it is that you exactly have to do when you open up the little lockers. For me, I chose locker number 6, and I had to drink this kind of somewhat awful tasting red stuff, actually, when it came to the secret skeleton key room for Zombie High School. I'd say that yes, Zombie High School definitely had a pretty darn good length to it and things of that nature. The only negatives about Zombie High School that prevent it from being my number 1 spot when it comes to being the best haunted house in Cedar Point were there were just not nearly as much variety when it came towards some of the certain scares that were presented when it came to Zombie High School, and it didn't have more like psychological types of horrors as much as other haunted houses might do when it comes to more professional types of haunted houses and things of that nature. And in addition to that, the last bit of stuff that prevents it from being the #1 haunted house at Cedar Point, in my honest opinion, is the theme that it's supposed to be a high school that teaches zombies how to be zombies. And I thought to myself, oh geez, that is so ridiculous. It would have been a lot better if it was just a high school where all the students turned into bloodthirsty zombies. That would be so much better than trying to make it as silly as a school that teaches zombies how to be zombies. I mean, it's not rocket science, for crying out loud, for a zombie or pretty much a mostly mindless bloodthirsty cannibalistic monster that's supposed to eat human flesh. Seriously, that's a no-brainer, really. So yeah, that is why Zombie High School is my #2 pick for the scariest haunted house the scariest and the best haunted house at Cedar Point for its Halloweekends event. Now, my #1 pick is actually the one I did the lights on point of view perspective for that you saw in the parts, and I thought was the best, was Eerie Estate. Sorry about that, Eerie Estate. Or George Andrew Bokeling's Eerie Estate. Is my #1 pick for the best haunted house at Cedar Point's Halloweekends. I thought that the theme of this was really nicely done in my opinion. I just love the theme of a dark, foreboding, awesome, pretty creepy looking mansion. And I thought that so much of the decor was so nicely presented. I really loved all of the unique looking antiques and all of the other decorations that really made this look like an old-fashioned creepy mansion, in my honest opinion. And also, it had plenty of great gore-like decorations and things of that nature, and disgusting things like fake bugs and things that really helped make a great creepy presentation for this entire haunted house in general. And it was not overkill in the slightest. It was actually, I thought, a pretty well balanced amount of these horrific decorations, and there was great variety. It just wasn't a bunch of all the time bloody and gory and disemboweled body parts and things of that nature and things like that, compared to that of said a few of the other haunted houses that I already mentioned. Instead, this time around, you were getting like a really great amount of variety that definitely had fit the mansion theme in general, so that was a real great plus, I have to say. In addition to that, another real great positive plus in general when it came to Eerie Estate was that it did include a lot of great screamsters with a lot of really well presented scares in general that I have to say were some of the best I had experienced out of all the haunted houses that night when I went through most of the haunted houses that Saturday night, and I was just really pleased by the screams, especially in Eerie Estate, and the scares that were presented. The only one that I have to say was a little bit off and too predictable was that of this one screamster that was completely an entire money bag monster, and I saw it coming too much because I thought it was way too obvious. Anyway, aside from this, I have to say I really thought that one of the most best skeleton key rooms were actually presented in this haunted house too. And this is another spoiler when it comes to skeleton key rooms, and the final spoiler I have to mention. This room in general makes it so that you have to try and find your way out, and is completely pitch black and dark. I mean, entirely pitch black and dark. I mean, aside from trying to find your way out of this pitch black room that's inside Eerie Estate, you also have to find this one random screamster who will be able to give you a little item item that you need to grab, and then when you grab it, she'll actually be willing to open up the door that will help lead you out of the said dark room. Yes, I'd say that this one definitely presented the most challenge to me, and I did love how it was so nice, dark, and pitch black, even though I know other people may not have really enjoyed that when it came to the skeleton key room deal and things of that nature. So, as for that other skeleton key room that was in the wax museum and everything else, I'll just say that disappointingly enough, I'm sad I didn't get to experience it, but I do have an idea as to what it was after I heard rumors on the internet that the skeleton key room for one of them was that you had to touch something like Pappy's guts. And when I heard that, I thought, oh man, that sounds like a great skeleton. That sounds like a really great gruesome skeleton room key deal. So if that was the case, and that's what I might be anticipating was the skeleton key room for the Eden Musee's Wax Museum and Chamber of Horrors, that's a real disappointment that I did not get to experience that. Anyway, here is something pretty cool. This is actually the brochure when it actually comes to the Halloweekends event. As I will open up the brochure just to be able to show it off to you, I just want to show you that yes, there were a whole lot of actually random shows and things of that nature when it came to everything else. And I know it's difficult to be able to see all this stuff because it's pretty blurred, but for the thing right there with the top hat and stuff, I experienced at least most of that show, as I mentioned, the Skeleton Crew show, and in addition to that, there are a few other really great shows. I don't know if I'll be able to experience something like the Edge of Madness live Dead show or not. If I'm able to go back next year, and that's just a possible if. But there's also, in addition to that, one other random show, and that's pretty much the carnival, the so-called sideshow, a carnival of magic spectacle, which I know when it comes to small things like these cameras don't work very well for stuff like that, and that it's most likely pretty blurred. So in general, that is what what I had not really experienced, except for, as you already know the Monster Midway Invasion Celebration Parade, and I am so sorry that the brochure in general, that you can't see absolutely everything, but this camera has a lot more difficulty capturing some really small things in general and blurs a lot. So with that said and done, and that you guys now have a little bit of a glimpse of my bedroom and everything else, I only have to say this much, that I really hope that I'm able to go back next year for Cedar Point's Halloweekends again, but this time with a good friend of mine, so I can be able to film and capture everything that I missed, unfortunately, for this year's group of videos. Given how long this is, this will be actually now my final part, or just a review video, given that this took a lot longer than I anticipated. So anyway, this has been the Master Chief 1, and I hope that you had enjoyed seeing my content for Cedar Point's Halloweekends 2014, and I guarantee you for next year, the content will be far better than what you had seen already. So as I said, this is N Chief 1 signing off, and I cannot wait to be able to see you and I hope I can be able to see you for next year. But if I do not see you for next year, then stay tuned. Then actually stay tuned for my next amount of great content, as I will actually go back to Cedar Point normally for the month of May. I don't mean like for opening day, I just mean for the month of May with my best friend in the world, actually. Which you will actually get to see more of her coming up eventually. So this has been so as I said, this is the N Chief 1 signing off, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.